All right, everybody, it's time for another super happy, fun time, hour, good times all around. I hope you're having a great day. I'm not having a bad one. I hope you're having a good one. We got a guest. We're going to be doing some AMA stuff, so if you're in the chat, please feel free to ask questions. But obviously, a lot of us content creators, we've been bad. We've been so bad that we are being associated with all sorts of things under the guise of the left-right paradigm, and I just don't see it. I see this latest thing as a scam. This has been in the works for some time now, and now that people like Dan Dix and even to an extent Ford Fisher, who's obviously just about as agnostic as it gets, have been demonetized on the platform, their videos randomly being taken down. We're in the next level of the Orwellian digital universe, and to help me out with that is Media Root's own Robbie Martin. How we doing, Robbie?
Doing great, Jason. Thanks for having me on again.
Well, thank you for coming in. I should have checked, but I totally did not frame you up correctly while we were talking because we had those audio issues. But we're going to do this on the fly. Why don't you tell people about yourself while we're getting going, and I will put up the website.
So I host a podcast with my sister, Abby Martin, who probably a lot of your listeners already are familiar with, called Media Roots Radio. We release an episode every week. We have an episode coming out. Our newest episode is going to be an interview with Eli Clifton from Low Blog about how a neoconservative think tank has been heavily involved with the Trump administration. The think tank's called the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. So I'm excited about that episode. And I also produce a documentary film called The Very Heavy Agenda. That's a 3-part, 7.5-hour documentary film series about the project for the new American century, starting around 9/11, spanning all the way through the Obama era to the new Cold War, Cold War 2.0 paradigm happening now, and how the neocons had a direct influence over that.
Well, exactly. And right now, man, we're in a situation where that neocon agenda is very much in effect and very much in our face on a level where if the modern version of tomorrow's news today was around a decade ago, this is it. They're pulling the trigger. They're sending the president's men. They're going into Iran. And we saw the total opposite of that in the so-called alternative media, just on the heels of the next round of digital censorship. Is there a connection with that? And if so, what is it, Robbie?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, there's definitely a connection between what's happening now and a long-term neoconservative agenda. And I guess the clearest link that I can point people to is if you read the same infamous Project for the New American Century document that said basically that we need a new Pearl Harbor to get all these things in place that the neocons wanted. In that same document, one of the main sections of the document is how the United States government can have hegemony and control of cyberspace. They also lay out the Space Force that Trump later talked about his administration. But to me, one of the most interesting parts that's the least talked about is how the neocons had a plan in 2000, almost 20 years ago, to essentially control cyberspace in the same way that they want the American government and military to physically control, global space and have sort of military bases around the world to maintain hegemony. So, and I didn't even remember that until maybe like a month ago, but it's been clear that since the election of Donald Trump, there has essentially been this fear-mongering surrounding the idea of fake news, which is an umbrella term that can mean conspiracy theories or really any form of quote-unquote fake news, or Russian disinformation. And we saw sort of the coalescing of these two fear-mongering campaigns about fake news and Russian disinformation that sort of culminated in this idea that the internet somehow needs to be purged of or protected from Russian disinformation or fake news. And then we saw a neoconservative think tank formed partly by Bill Kristol, Michael Chertoff, other people from the Obama administration, including Mike Morrell, called the Alliance for Securing Democracy, which its entire agenda is about pointing out Russian secret Russian actors who are trying to manipulate our political landscape. And the whole entire think tank, believe it or not, is based on 400 anonymous Twitter accounts that the Alliance for Securing Democracy has decided are Russian bots. And they base pretty much all of their data off of these 400 Twitter accounts and claim that whatever movements these 400 Twitter accounts are making, that's the Russian government's agenda. And often what you'll see is it'll match up with right-wing talking points or anti-imperialist left talking points. And that's, to me, what is really the crux of what their agenda is essentially to basically stifle, censor, marginalize, and outright ban points of view that are threatening to the establishment or, corporate or government power, essentially.
Well, you look at that and you look at a guy like Bolton, for instance, and a guy like Pompeo. Now, Pompeo, some leaked recordings came out. I don't know if you heard about this yet, about Venezuela. But they came out, and basically he was lobbying for them to go into Venezuela and get Guaido in there and try to get people behind it. And, some of the papers, Washington Post, I believe is the one that broke it, talked about how he was talking to Jewish leaders, a.k.a. Israelis. What is their interest there? Well, I'll tell you, they're part of the Anglo-American Empire, and as they're going in there, they're getting ready for Iran. They're cutting deals. Well, what are you going to do for us in the Gulf? That's how I feel about this. I feel like these things are going to operate hand in hand, and in that sense, there's a good chance that we may see some type of odd false flag to try to get more people against Maduro in that region, or at least get the Western populace against Maduro in another South American country. I don't know if that's going to be the case, but it's certainly, we know, again, hand in glove, CIA, Mossad, NSA, intelligence, they'll work in order to have plausible deniability with other agencies around the world. And there's a leak, a new Snowden leak out there that Zero Hedge has put out, talking about U.S. intelligence aiding in Israeli Mossad assassination operations.
Yeah, there is definitely an alignment happening here. All you have to, I just interviewed this guy, Eli Clifton from Low Blog, and all you have to do is look at two of Trump's top donors, Sheldon Adelson, and I forget his name, basically the CEO of Home Depot. These two guys are some of the biggest billionaire Israel supporters in the United States. And Sheldon Adelson, who is also a funder of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, Trump's biggest donor, in 2011, I believe he said that we need to literally drop a nuke. I think maybe even we talked about that on the last stream we did together. So there's all these forces aligning right now. The neocons are pretending like this is just a pressure campaign against Iran and even Venezuela. But what we really know, Jason, is that when you raise the stakes like that, all these people inside internally know that creates more of a potential for a spark to actually create a war. And, it's not cynical or conspiratorial to say that this pressure campaign, the idea that they're just trying to pressure the Iranians to cave is BS. We know that they want to basically create a scenario where it's like the old sheriff in the Old West throwing down the gun on the ground and saying, pick up the gun. That's essentially what's going on.
You're not wrong. You're not. Yeah, pick up that. It's the dirty. It literally is that type of deal. And I've covered Adelson before. It's unbelievable that people don't realize this when he really has. Again, he's caused so much turmoil in the Middle East when he said he was going to get us out. And the moment that he has the opportunity, in my opinion, to say, he starts talking about the military-industrial complex, right? He talks about how he wanted to get out of Syria. Why didn't he bring up the leaked OPCW report? That's the perfect time to have a president with a document that's leaked say, hey, by the way, I was right. There are people against me. What do I do about it? Instead of this cocksure attitude where that's just leading us into war. I just don't get it. He's able to talk well out of both sides of his mouth. But what do we really do right now? We've talked about this before. Tulsi Gabbard, probably our best bet. She's a bit of a gun grabber. She's on the Council on Foreign Relations. She talks about the war on terror in two terms, says, we have to stop these regime change wars. Well, that might not include Afghanistan and others, by the way. And then she also says torture works sometimes. And these are very problematic. She's never addressed them fully. And she backed down from some of her Syria work. So right now, I just feel like if the pressure is put on almost anywhere, whether it be in our politics or digitally, like we began talking about, and we're going to come back to, I feel like it's Twilight Zone time, man. We're here.
Yeah, I mean, there was some hope, I guess. Like, there's a lot of people who think it's very hopeful that a lot of people have this awareness now of the idea of the deep state. Even Trump's talking about the military-industrial complex that lit a lot of people's brains up, thinking, well, he knows what's going on, or he's taking the mask off what's going on. But I maybe used to have some of that hope, but I definitely don't anymore. And, Jason, what really bothers me is I do think that and this is also maybe a conspiracy about conspiracy theories, but you've seen it too, is that there has been this strange conglomeration, almost like a lockstep sort of locking down of the conspiracy movement to the point where the narratives are very like manufactured seeming now, where a lot of the conspiracy movement is always on the same page, always finding a way to get behind Trump. And that's a very strange thing. And, we already know that people like Cass Sunstein in the Obama administration were trying to figure out ways back then to infiltrate conspiracy movements and to basically discredit them. And he lays out a whole paper of how to do this. I mean, even the flat earth movement is just such a bizarre out of left field thing that's become popular that, it doesn't even make sense to me how that could have even organically popped up.
It wasn't organic. It wasn't. That's because it wasn't. Because, Robbie, let me tell you something. It wasn't fucking organic, and you're goddamn right when you talk about Cass Sunstein. And big ups to my boy Luke Radowski. Listen, if you're not subscribed to We Are Change and News for a Change, those haven't been hit yet. My personal channel hasn't been hit yet, but please do. We do a ton of work there. He talked to Cass Sunstein, and it's never been about left or right. And this whole thing with Crowder is a smokescreen. They're trying to take questionable language and behavior that may or may not be monetized after somebody who literally promotes propaganda. And you better protect me on that, Google and YouTube. Because when I see that guy, Carlos, I forget what his last Meza, he's becoming infamous now, right? I watch his stuff. And he did this piece, and I'm going to give you props here for about 2 seconds, buddy, on Fox News. And he did expose how Fox News is basically an arm for the right wing, and that's how Roger Ailes created it. And during the Nixon administration, he envisioned it. Absolutely correct. Showed how it gave talking points to government. Good for you, buddy. But then when you sit there and you say there's no left-wing alternative, I'm like, what effing universe does any thinking person live on when literal talking points were leaked to the Clinton campaign during the Democratic debates? We go on and on and on and on and on, how those are simply bought and paid for by that side of the operation. I mean, Ted Turner, when he did control that company, was an open leftist. Let's be honest. So it's imagination land. And the bottom line is, Robbie, when it comes to issues of censorship, especially in the case of digital censorship and the military-industrial complex, they ride or die on the same level. They ain't coming to defend either of us. So they're essentially the same thing with very, very small viewpoints that are meant to divide a population.
Absolutely. And I think there is something to the idea that a lot of these mass bannings, mass purges seem to be focused on some of the most egregious or like offensive, toxic figures, like Alex Jones being one of the main examples. And I think that what that's done is it's created an opportunity for a lot of conservatives to essentially act like this is a conspiracy against conservatives, to censor them, to ban them, because all these companies are liberal or somehow have a liberal agenda, and that's really what this is all about. I strongly disagree with that, and I think that, ultimately what's happening here is basically a lot of points of view on the internet are threatening to various power structures in the United States and elsewhere. And by essentially banning these really offensive people, first, it will make the medicine go down easier months from now, weeks from now, years from now, when pretty much anybody who talks about 9/11 truth, who talks about the military-industrial complex in a really serious, aggressive way, those people will have their channels not just demonetized, but probably likely banned. I don't know if you saw this, Jason. There was something that said basically that YouTube is now changing their policy. So anybody that questions major events where people died will now be like basically looked into and demonetized. So what does that really mean? I mean, they use Sandy Hook as the main example, but you kind of break it down from there. It's like, well, what about like the Gulf of Tonkin? Historians have now largely agreed that didn't happen and there were no casualties. But that technically falls under the new, I guess, terms of service of what you're not allowed to talk about.
And let me pause you right there, and let's talk about some of this stuff. So you used Sandy Hook as an example. Now, I posted several excerpts of the Alex Jones deposition where he clearly was lying, and for that purpose, and shown that. And then I did a 37-minute breakdown of deep research and one of the basic lies that was told during that whole thing. Now, in that, I used evidence that was given to us about a year plus afterwards. You know, all of the FBI release of the investigation, what was available, what I had. I documented that I said the same exact thing. I believe it was in January of 2013 when it came out. Had the IntelliHub articles. I told the truth when I said I reached out to InfoWars with all this information. Now, I played police audio that was out shortly after the event, all factual. Now, I did that, and then I broke down why all that other stuff was bullshit. Because I also questioned the event because of the stuff that I showed in that. Am I a bad guy? I'm not talking about fucking crisis actors. I'm not talking about no kids dying, and I haven't been. And in fact, I provided plenty of evidence that was not the case. Am I a bad guy because I think there might have been something else going on that we weren't told the exact truth on that? Am I now a target? Let me give you another example. I've done plenty of Dark Overlord stuff, TDO deep dives. Well, that is not in line with a lot of the official 9/11 jargon that's out there, my friend. There's plenty of stuff in there that's already contradicting the official version. In fact, there are 3 chapters of that thing that I have the staff reports of now. You know, I've only gone over one of them, the flights one, where there was in that staff report, we actually got to read the name of the person that made that initial claim that someone was shot on Flight 11. Okay, we'd never had that before. And there's a lot of really juicy nuggets in there. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to get to because I got to tell you, that's some real deep research. Am I not allowed to do that? That's not even questioning an event. That's reading a document to maybe, you know, we got 58 live now, maybe hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands. Am I a bad guy for that? Is that something that's not allowed on this platform? But I got to listen to some fucking puppet sit there and read off a script regurgitated around the globe about propaganda bullshit that's going to put me in war with Iran? Nah, man. And I'm not down. It's unbelievable to me. So I don't know if they're cutting their own throat on this platform. I hope they come around and realize you squeeze tight enough and you're not even going to have this is going to become mainline television, which is failing. That's how I feel about it, Robbie.
Well, I mean, you bring up a lot of really good points there. I mean, it's obvious on some level that like, let's just go back to the idea of Russia today. That must have just really gotten under the craw of people in the U.S. government to the extent where they felt like they needed to create a campaign to basically, you know, propagandize and brainwash the American public into thinking that Russia was in every nook and cranny trying to influence our political landscape. I mean, that's how threatening that RT was to them. So you can imagine that having an open and free platform where you can post videos that question events like 9/11 in a really factual and coherent way. Let me put it another way. The lies of the U.S. government are so egregious and so obvious and just so in your face that it's really easy, actually, if you're given a free and open platform to create videos that poke holes in all that stuff and to get people to pay attention to it. And that is a threat to the power structure. It's clearly a threat. So, and also, Jason, maybe this isn't true because I haven't actually asked you about this personally, but you experienced Google censorship really early on in the form of Google Video. Yeah. I mean, that system was supposed to be democratized, where it was like the biggest views gets ranked on the front page, and that's how it was supposed to be set up.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, brother.
When Loose Change got up to on the front page, they kept knocking it off the front page.
And not only did they knock that off the front page, but no one's really going to remember this, but when I dropped Fabled Enemies in 2008, day
Yeah.
one, within 2 hours of us putting it up, it was number one and skyrocketing. And then it
Holy crap.
completely went off the top 100 within 2 hours.
Wow.
Yes, absolutely. 100%. 100%. And, that's when the movement was kind of dying down. And I had done a picture that really was no physical anomalies whatsoever. We obviously looked at Building 7 and put the Barry Jennings information in there. But I'll tell you what words weren't in there. Controlled demolition. They weren't once. We never theorized in that film. What were in there? Pakistani ISI. Oh, Able Danger. The Israeli Mossad. Amdocs. Converse. We go on and on and on. There was plenty of information in there. Joey B. Joey Biden's in there. Hey, I'm fucking Joey B. running for president over here. Check me out. Let me rub your fucking daughter. I'm a gangster. Am I going to go down for that? I mean, give me a break. He acts like a gangster. He walks like a gangster. He talks like a gangster. I'm not allowed to say that the vice president, a literal gangster, was a gangster before he was that? He was. As a senator, he was a gangster. Am I offensive? Is that an offensive term? Just so you understand what the term gangster means, is when people of power collude together to do illegal shit and also sometimes take the lives of others. He's done all those things. He's done all those things. Period. Look at his policies. That's some real deal shit. Robbie Martin. And I want to keep this platform.
What we were saying before about this Dark Overlord stuff you've been covering, Jason. I mean, there's two different tracks happening here. It's like we have this slow motion, basically prosecution nailing Julian Assange to the wall for releasing, whatever the government's saying, he hacked the documents, leaked documents. They're basically trying to criminalize the idea of leaking inside documents. So even just covering leaked documents on YouTube, I would be really surprised if that was still allowed in a year from now. And I think even some establishment journalists now are realizing the danger in this prosecution because they're like, well, we want to be able to cover that stuff, and we did cover that stuff. I mean, they covered tons of the DNC leaks when they came out. So that's happening simultaneously with sort of this clampdown on the internet as a whole. We have to take it very seriously. What can we do about that?
It's a great question. I literally, we had a bit shoot. I know we got a D2, but for my personal channel, I started a bit shoot last night. The problem is, I'm busting my ass putting 6 to 10 of these things up a day now, really trying to go hard, right? And now I gotta upload them to 6 to 10 times in another platform and try to keep up with that. It's difficult, man. I'm one person. I take care of a family. I want people to realize, we've talked about YouTube as a digital platform, but let me bring people's attention to this. Now, I'm hoping I'm going to get Aaron on. I talked to him earlier today, and I kind of made him aware of this because, hey, check it out. Amazon Prime is full of dodgy documentaries pushing dangerous. I can't even say it. I won't say it because of the Orwellian algorithm, but it's there. So they took out GMO stuff too on this. Okay, so it's not just stuff on HBO or HIV. It's not just stuff on cancer. GMO, OMG was taken down, guys. All right, so now you can't criticize GMOs, and that's the next thing. And I've seen the Stanislaw Brzezinski documentary. We're not allowed to watch that. So I said to myself, I wonder if The Minds of Men, the 3.5 hour plus documentary by Aaron and Melissa Dykes, which is literally just factual documentation and video clips, guys. It's unbelievable. It's actually going to be at the Alamo Draft House for its theater premiere. If you're in Texas, please go check that out. They're great people. It's an amazing documentary. So I said to him, hey, I read this article. I sent it to him. I go, are you guys still up on Amazon? And although 2 of their other shorter documentaries are, Robbie, on June 2nd, they actually did take them down. And let's bring that up and we'll show you what they said about it. Even though it had a 4.3, 76 reviews, 4.5 stars. You understand that? You know how hard that's actually to get engaged? And this is a paid. This isn't on Prime, by the way. Prime Video, $4.99. And God bless them for doing that. But apparently it doesn't meet their standards and it's no longer available. And here it is. Customer feedback and iterating on their behalf includes, but not limited to, a combination of star reviews, customer reviews, and or content viewing behavior has indicated that this title does not meet our customer quality expectations. As a result, all offers included with Prime Buy and Rent have been removed. So they're removing it on paid platforms that businesses are putting up. Think about that. Now, The Minds of Men is about MK Ultra. That's a historical event of, I don't know, 50 plus years ago. Started in the 50s, in the 60s, into the 70s. I cover that on this channel. You go over here, I got a whole series on MK Ultra. Am I also now to be demonetized because I covered an actual program that hurt people and manipulated their minds, and actually some of the things that were found out are in use today? I'm not supposed to say that, Robbie. I mean, talk about, he who controls the past controls the future, brother.
Yeah, I mean, I sometimes I look at this from the angle of, they got to have lists of people, like Blacklist, essentially. We are living in sort of a new McCarthyite era in a lot of ways, not just because of all the digital surveillance and social media, because of this Russia hysteria climate. It sort of, rekindled that mentality.
It's unreal.
No, it's totally unreal. So, sometimes I think, my sister has worked for RT. A lot of colleagues of mine have worked for various Russian-funded media outlets like Sputnik. You at one time worked for InfoWars. So I feel like there are definitely, it's almost like at this point, I feel like it's not even our content necessarily that they're going to ban us for, or marginalize us for. It's just we're going to be punished for these associations. I mean, and I know I'm speculating there, but I know that people in the U.S. government hold serious grudges. I mean, they take a lot of this stuff really deeply personally, and people like you, Jason, are definitely on their radar. I'm absolutely sure of it. People like Abby are. Less so someone like me, but a lot of these people out there like us are on these people's radar, and we, on some level, have deeply upset them at different times. And I think we need to keep that in mind as well.
We should be deeply upsetting them. They fucking deserve it. Are you kidding me? How they sleep at night? I don't understand. I don't get it. I don't care how fluffy your goddamn mattress is, how hot your fucking maid is that you're banging on the side, bro. How do you sleep at night? I don't get it. How could you ever be pro-censorship? How does that work out for humanity? Somewhere down the line, you're the target too. Nobody gets out alive, bro. Nobody gets out alive. If you're that selfish, and you're that self-indulged that you think by stopping the speech of others, your power is going to grow and things are going to be better because of it, you're in fucking La La Land.
Well, this is, and I think what you're talking about is true, that this will come back to affect everybody. So the fact that so many people in the establishment are pushing this right now, especially like these neocon think tanks and some of these, fake news watchdogs. I think that it is indicative of that they basically have become so desperate that they're willing to do a scorched earth policy to destroy the First Amendment free speech landscape we have in the United States here, because they have become that desperate to cling to their power, and they're willing to torch it all to cling to that. So I think that that's what we're experiencing now. It's a desperation. It's sort of a last gasp where maybe on some level they understand that actually subverting the First Amendment would be too outrageous to people. So let's just erode it from behind the scenes and lobby all these private companies to just sort of stealthily censor the internet so that people think we still have freedom of speech. When in reality, the actual effect is that we don't, because, joining Facebook, something like Facebook now is sort of the public square. I mean, you lose out on being able to communicate with the world if you're not part of these social media networks. So, I mean, there's so many angles to this, I mean, one angle is, federal regulation. But again, maybe last time I was on here, we talked about that. I was sort of advocating, but
because I think
I don't know
there's a
about
key
now.
to that. I think there's a big key. I think that people are framing it wrong. So you have the one side that basically says it's a public square, or it's a publisher, right? Or it's a platform. So they're basically public square and publisher, kind of the same things. Platform, they're private, they get to decide. Here's where all that's bullshit. They're a business that profits, right? And
Yes.
there's a thing called collusion and unfair business practices. And I got news for you. When you're as big as the Googles of the world and you're as big as the Amazons of the world, you have investments in the content, hell, that you sign. And it is unfair business practices to pit that content against competing content on your platform if by the terms and services that you provide, they are never broken. I have not broken them. And that's where I think there's antitrust suits here that are, especially when you look at algorithms and Facebook in particular, that has you pay for ads and pay promotions for posts. Now, YouTube doesn't have that. That's a little bit different, right? But let's say if YouTube looks at their content, how much they're investing, and they say, oh my God, this guy is cutting into not only the time, but look at all the super chats. We're still not, even with our 30%, we're still not making 1/15 of what we should. That's an unfair business practice. And I don't think enough people are looking at it in that angle. Because the other side of that argument is that they're really not a private business because they're so heavily embedded with the government, and the corporate welfare aspect that they don't pay taxes should make that a non-argument and exempt. Those are the two camps I am. Because if it was a true private business, I would have a problem with saying, hey, you can't do this. That's because it's their policy. Unless, of course, it's selective enforcement, which, of course, we're seeing, right? But then the other angle is these are all businesses that you and I pay taxes to elevate. all of it, period. They don't pay taxes, folks. Amazon paying nothing. Google that owns YouTube paying nothing. Alphabet, their parent company, nothing. So that's what we really need to say. It's beyond a monopoly because they also are hand in glove with the government. And no one wants to talk about that. When you got a guy like Bezos who's buying up the Post and then investing in Vox and BuzzFeed, all right? And then he's also got a $600 million deal to hold intelligence information and make that secure with the government. That's a fucking problem. And you know what? It's also a problem when you got Elon Musk and SpaceX and him and Blue Sky now hand in glove with NASA. NASA's spending $22 million a day. That's a big business. Space is a big business. And there are going to be backdoor deals that you and I could never even comprehend because you would have to be so close to them to understand the intricacies that are probably beyond horrific, bro. And that's the real issue. And no one's talking about that. They all subjugate it to those little simple talking points. Well, the right usually is for as you know, private businesses do what they want, and the left wants more government regulation, and then we can just back and forth. And that's not the fucking issue at all. These things are essentially military-industrial complex grade organizations. Get it through your head. That's what they are. They are tools to oppress us at this point. And I'm gonna rock this mic until they cut it off, and I'll find another place to rock it. And I might not be able to rock 10 videos a day if they cut my mic, but I'll tell you what, I'll find a way to do 2 or maybe 3, Robbie. And I think that's what we got to do. We just got to keep combating this thing, battling it back, trying to catch more flies with honey, saying, hey guys, I'm not here to trigger a liberal or cuck a conservative, all right? I'm here to bring people together. I think that's a starting point, right, Robbie?
Absolutely. And I think what you just talked about in terms of the corporate structure of this and how these companies are so deeply embedded with the U.S. government, the U.S. State Department, other governments around the world that do horrible things. That's the way I think we need to be looking at this. And I think we're really getting bogged down in this framing. Another part of the framing that's problematic that I think is distracting a lot of people is that Silicon Valley is comprised of, mostly socially liberal people because they're in the Bay Area. Therefore, these companies are leftist and have a leftist agenda. It's possible some of their social, viewpoints are informed by liberal politics. It would make sense they're in the Bay Area. However, I don't think that's what's ultimately guiding. Profits are what guide these giant corporations. And we need to remember that's ultimately what's in play here. They have an enormous amount of control. They're barely regulated. They're one of the biggest lobbyists in Washington, D.C. When I say they, I mean Google is, who owns YouTube. And, that's something that I think liberals and conservatives can come together on. But unfortunately, what's happened is it's become this, this idea that it's become a conservative witch hunt. And maybe some aspect of that, is understandable why people think that, but we're losing sight of what is really happening here and what is ultimately dangerous for everybody, I think.
No, I absolutely agree. And you know what? While I got you here, I want to, on the tail end of this, talk a little Bilderberg. We haven't really discussed it, but we just talked about Google and Eric Schmidt. At least back on the list. Maybe he wasn't there the last couple of years. Who knows? We know that people like Pompeo weren't on the list. A few others weren't on the list. But he wrote a book with Jared Cohen, who also went there, who's another Alphabet executive, Jigsaw, Council on Foreign Relations. He was the Director Advisory Board at the National Counterterrorism Center under both Condoleezza Rice and, of course, Hillary Clinton. Right and left. Not a right and left issue. Military-industrial complex. Okay, the subheadline is Reshaping the Future of People, Nations, and Business. These people, you want to talk about 4D chess, all right? This is 45D chess. And when they're sitting there with a guy like Peter Thiel that sits maybe across the way ideologically on some issues, but not many, they're cutting deals for that Trump administration, man. He's the technology advisor. And this meeting being more covered by C-SPAN, by the way. I covered that earlier this morning. I showed a video where the headline was Mike Pompeo arrives in Switzerland, where they filmed him with Jared Cohen for Bilderberg and filmed him for 25 minutes going around like he's a celebrity with 25 Secret Service guys around him.
Hilarious.
They're covering it on June 1st. There's not one story on Infowars.com on June 1st, Saturday, the main day of the event. No talk about it at all. What does that tell you? First of all, let me get your take on Bilderberg. But then I want to get your take on the coverage of Bilderberg, that now it's so mainline that was actually C-SPAN 1 did that. And yet, the alternative media that I helped bring it into the public eye with barely covered it, obfuscated it, and really whitewashed it.
Well, there's multiple things going on. I mean, we know that Alex Jones and InfoWars have this Pied Piper effect, so that whatever they cover or do not cover, it seems to trickle down to a great deal of the other alternative media outlets, where, perhaps that's why a lot of them didn't talk about Bilderberg, because Alex Jones didn't, he just ignored it completely. That's one possibility. We already know that Alex Jones is hugely supportive and defensive of Donald Trump. And that's nothing new. But in terms of the media coverage of Bilderberg, I hardly saw any. I just referencing to what you said about that, these are the people who actually play 4D or 5D chess. I mean, I think that's something we also need to really, look past this sort of this idea that this is some kind of partisan witch hunt, and remember that people like Eric Schmidt and Google, they're the kind of people who, like, if you're looking at like a horse race, for example, and some of the horses are left wing, some of them are right wing, these people bet on all the horses in the race. They're not interested in lifting up one form of like social liberal ideology, and that's not their main thing. Their main thing is profits and power. And, Bilderberg, I think, is a great example of that, because you have people from all across the ideological spectrum who are these oligarchs or people in these high positions of power. But when the rubber meets the road for those people, even though people like Peter Thiel and Eric Schmidt may be socially hold different ideals, or maybe Peter Thiel is pro-Trump, Eric Schmidt's anti-Trump, when the rubber meets the road, they are far more similar ideologically than me or you or normal people are. I mean, they definitely share the same agenda. I mean, when a rubber meets the road, probably the main thing they disagree on is how much baby blood to consume to keep yourself 10 years younger looking. So that's, and that wasn't even an Alex Jones reference. This is something that Peter Thiel has actually admitted to doing. He consumes children's blood. There's actually there's some quack, like, expensive doctors you can go to in Silicon Valley who actually inject you with younger people's blood.
They parodied on whatchamacallit, Silicon Valley, the show by, why can't I think of his name? He's brilliant.
Mike Judge.
Yes, Mike Judge.
Yeah.
Brilliant show. I don't know if there's a new season. I haven't seen it in a while. But I'm behind on my television. We all get there. But you're right. I mean, look, and Thiel, has talked about wanting his own island. He's heavily invested in sketchy vaccines for herpes overseas. Am I going to get in trouble for saying that? He's still on the board over at Facebook. You don't think Thiel knows exactly how much content they're aggregating, the profiles they're building on people, the algorithms they're building at Facebook. You don't think he's just as involved, if not more, than Zuckerberg, that by all accounts over the last 12 to 18 months seems to be on his way out in a hostile takeover? They're trying everything they can to get him out. And I don't think they liked in the very beginning when he laughed at them about this Russian interference in the election through trolling and ads on Facebook. But boy, he turned around like a little bitch, didn't you, Mark? You really got there. Oh, yes, sir. Yep. And in turn for that, no one asked you a real goddamn question the whole time. It was barely anything out there. There was a couple hits, but nothing good. No one talked about automated content recognition. Nobody talked about how this thing was on all the time, how the cameras can be accessed, the phones accessed, how they're building big data profiles on grandma outside of this that doesn't have it because she's on the phone with you, because she's sending you pictures, that there's facial recognition databases. All this is fact, all right? But little Markey didn't get asked about it. All the good people over in the Congress, they didn't seem to know, but they were real happy to talk. You know, we love your platform. You know, I just talked to my grandkids today, and let me tell you, little Tommy's doing good over in the Little League. I want to thank you for that, Mark. But let's talk about a conservative bias. You know, these talking points, I mean, I can be an asshole politician too, but I would feel bad about it because I have a goddamn soul. I don't know how people lie on a regular basis like this. Lies don't make friends, Robbie. All right, I think that's my final rant. I'm going to give you the floor for anything else you want to talk about. I'm going to show people the website right here. It is MediaRoots.org. Abby has said she's going to do an interview with me, hopefully in a couple months if we both still have a platform, which is going to be great. I haven't talked to her in quite some time, and I've always admired her work. I think she's great. So give us the rundown, Robbie.
Well, I mean, the thought I'll leave people with, just to reinforce how this is not really a partisan thing and that this is something much worse, is that Facebook actually formed a fake news advisory board. And the members of this advisory board are it's a bipartisan advisory board that goes across the whole spectrum. One of the players are people from Snopes.com. Another group that's involved in this fake news watchdogging on Facebook is Washington Post. But the two that surprised me the most, considering that most people perceive Facebook as this flamingly liberal company where Mark Zuckerberg is some kind of crazy radical leftist, is that the Daily Caller, the right-wing outlet owned by Tucker Carlson, and the Weekly Standard, that was owned by Bill Kristol, started by Bill Kristol, both sit on the same advisory board for Facebook. So that should tell people that this is actually something much more insidious than what how it's being portrayed. People from the Daily Caller, like Chuck Ross, who actually does, even though I don't agree with his perspective on a lot of things, he writes a lot of good content on Russiagate. Whenever he talks about, censorship of conservatives on social media and stuff, he never brings up that the outlet he works for is actually sitting on the board of Facebook, determining what's fake news or not. So you got to look for these things, and it's a really, to me, it's much more nuanced and complex than the narratives that we're being told now. And that when Donald Trump starts tweeting about how he needs to bring in Jack to talk about how Twitter needs to stop censoring conservatives, damn well that that's not the real issue that's at play. This is something far broader and worse.
And let me say this, as all this is happening, I'm not sure if you've seen these pictures of Assange yet, but they sent a doctor in. He's got snuck out. He looks pretty bad. He's looking gaunt. That's not a great picture of him right there. I'm telling these people right now, if there really is a dead man switch on this guy, if they really have more documentation, now's the only time to release it. Don't wait until he's gone. Don't wait until he's dead. We need this information now, especially because, just like you said, Robbie, we may not be able to go over classified, leaked documents on this platform or other platforms without going to prison very, very soon. So if you got it, don't wait, man. They're obviously, it doesn't look good for them. When guys like Ron Paul are asking whether they're trying to kill the guy, I don't even know if we're going to see a trial. What if it's not, a week or a month or even a year from now, they draw this out 2-3 years, and somewhere down the line he passes. He was ill for a while, and what's your take on that before you go?
Oh, it would be horrific, to think that they would, they're trying to figure out a way to get rid of him or slow motion assassinate him in prison. But we've seen that before with people, and I believe there was an interesting incident. I want to say it was Milosevic who
Yep.
died sort of mysteriously in prison, and it was sort of speculated. Well, did they like treat him really inhumanely because that was kind of the punishment, and they didn't really care that he died? I don't really know the details of that, but I mean, this has happened before. So there's definitely some real concern here that this is what they're doing.
And especially because, like you said, that's an incident from the 90s, Bosnia, Kosovo, for those that don't know. People have questioned what exactly we went there for and the allegations that were going on. We can't, I can't question what happened in Kosovo with Milosevic now. I mean, that's something that's, 25 years ago in history. Oh, well, that's a major event, Jason. I mean, this new digital Orwellianism, I'm not accepting it. You shouldn't either. Folks, if you're new to the game, if you're just tuning in, you like this, you like Robbie Martin, MediaRoots.org, join the Burmis Brigade, subscribe right now. You can ring the bell, but I tell people, listen, forget about ringing that bell. You go right up here to the videos section, and then you star that. It's in your favorites. You just come back. Doing 6 to 10 videos a day. You're bound to see something you haven't. Hopefully you like the content. I appreciate everybody coming down. We will be back later tonight with more streamage and more truth while I can do it. So thanks, everybody. I'll talk to you soon.